12 essential insights for emotional sobriety. I believe that this is going to be a definitive work in terms of defining emotional sobriety and laying out a path to achieve it. If you're stuck in recovery, or if you want to take the next step in your recovery, please read my book. Those of you that have been with us know that we are on this journey of exploring how the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous help us achieve emotional sobriety. And we are currently on step 7. And we've talked about the arc that occurs when we're working these steps is moving from a state of mind that is highly dependent on environmental support to the ability to support ourselves, the ability to achieve what I like to think of as self-support. And we've talked about how the steps generate this discharge, and how they're moving us towards this experience of emotional autonomy is the best way to describe it. Now, step 6 we've described as a pivot towards this becoming or developing the best possible attitude we can towards life. Well, at the same time we're developing the best possible attitude towards life, we are also developing our best possible self, which means we're developing a self that can stand on our own 2 feet. You know, a lot of people are surprised when they read Bill's letter that he's written, and that I believe is a wonderful synopsis of his views on emotional sobriety, that he talked about that he had to let go of his dependency on Alcoholics Anonymous. And so many people are surprised. What is Bill talking about? I mean, wasn't this a healthy dependence? You know, our dependence on alcohol and other drugs or whatever we were doing, you know, that was unhealthy, but isn't our dependence on meetings and the 12-step program and the fellowship healthy? And Bill clearly stated that it wasn't. And for a moment that perplexed me. And then I had that aha moment that Bill had as well. He said, this program is about helping us learn how to grow up, is to grow beyond our dependence so that we can depend on ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need anyone. We're not talking about being an island into ourself and the ultimate of self-sufficiency. It means that I take responsibility for myself, that if I need help, I ask for it, that I am the determining force in my life, that I take responsibility for creating my existence, and that I am 100% responsible for that. That's the path to emotional sobriety that we're on. Now, step 6 was that pivot towards this new possibility, right? Towards really committing committing ourselves to this best possible attitude, to be in our best possible self. So that's what we did when we get ready in step 6, to have all these defects of character removed. And then we humbly asked them to remove our defects in step 7. So one of the things that we've been talking about is what happens. What are we looking for? What is this best possible attitude that we can have? And I said last week that this week I want to talk about how we are making available that which was unavailable in achieving emotional sobriety. So I'll say that again. We are making available that which was unavailable. Well, what are you talking about, Alan? What does it mean to make available that was what was unavailable? Well, let's just take a few simple things, but then I want to talk about this in a much more complex way. One of the things that was unavailable for us before was to live our life committed to honesty. we had what I like to think of as conditional honesty. If it served me, I was honest. If it didn't, I wasn't. And so it was very circumstantial, my honesty. And now, as we move towards achieving integrity, which is an important part in terms of emotional sobriety, our honesty is unconditional. We are honest because we need to honor our integrity, our wholeness. So let me talk about this idea of wholeness. Now, early on in our development, that we made some decisions about who we had to be okay. Now, each of us chose whatever path seemed to be readily available to us and appealed to us. Some of us chose a path that appealed to mastery, that we had to be just the best that we could be. Some of us chose a path that appealed with the appeal of love, that God, if someone just loved me, then I'll be okay. Some of us took a path, we call it the appeal of freedom, where I don't want to be bogged down and controlled by anything, so I'm going to become needless and wantless. Those paths were our solution to this fear that we weren't going to be loved and accepted and that we weren't going to belong. And we thought if I could just sculpt myself, shape myself into this idea of who I think I need to be okay, then everything will work. Then life will just be fine. This is the key to my happiness. This is the key to my success. This is the key to a well-lived life. Now, when I chose that path, it meant certain things were okay and other things were not. Certain parts of who I am, and Thom and I talk about this a lot in terms of the myth of singularity, none of us are just a one self. There's so many, there's a population of selves in each of us. There's many different parts to us. That doesn't make us Sybil. We become Sybil when those parts are totally dissociated from one another. But for us, they all talk in our head, right? And you've heard it in the rooms. God, the committee's talking to me again. What am I going to do? The committee's in session. How is this going to work out? It's talking to me. I've got all these different ideas about what's going on, how I should be. We're conflicted. We're torn to pieces. Is what happens with all of this conflict because we don't know how to put all these different parts together. Now, when we chose a particular path, let's say it was the appeal of mastery, then any part of me that would be essential to achieving that goal became essential to my personality. And I pushed it forward. So being confident, being cocky, acting like a know-it-all, whatever, being the smartest kid in the class, working harder than everybody else, being the quickest person on the field, all of that drive would be pushed forward. The part of me that was insecure and unsure of myself would be rejected. You can't master things if you're insecure. You can't be the best if you're concerned that you're nothing. So any self-doubt, anything that didn't fit with the blueprint of that idealized self is going to be rejected. Now, when I reject parts of myself, I literally become Swiss cheese. I've got all these holes in my personality. Certain parts of me I can turn to, I can bring forward, I can bring into my life, but these other parts I have to reject. They're no longer available. So I make available what fits the idea of who I should be, and I reject, and now what's no longer is available, anything that doesn't fit with my idea of who I should be. What happens is now my functioning is going to have holes in it. In a situation where I might need to have humility in order to be able to learn something new, if I have the appeal of mastery, that humility is not available, because to me, it thinks like, well, my God, I'm not the master of my universe any longer. Now I'm threatened. Nobody's going to love me. Nobody's going to accept me. The anxiety, that basic anxiety that happened in the first place that developed this whole operation, now resurfaces. So that I can't share that with you. I can't let you see that part of me. Whatever doesn't fit with that idealized self is going to create holes in my personality. Those parts of me that don't fit are no longer available for me to use to deal with life. They're no longer available in terms of my functioning. They're no longer available in terms of my relationship with myself. And if I see one of those things, I'm going to hate myself for them because they threaten who I think I should be. So I'm going to feel terrible shame. My God, if I've got this appeal of mastery and all of a sudden I look incompetent, whoa, I can't let you see that. It'll be terrible. You won't love me. I won't be okay. Now, I want to remind everyone of this idea we have in the program that says until we let go of our old ideas, the result is nil. Now, remember, when we talked about step one and we talked about unmanageability, of course, there's an unmanageability created by our addictions. There's no denying that. But there's another unmanageability created by this idea that we had about how life is going to work for us. And we set out now to control everything to make sure things went our way. That is an original unmanageability that was created by this solution that I've just described. Yes, when our addiction came along, it threw, gasoline on top of the fire. No question about it. Things got a lot worse. Maybe for the first time in our life, we saw our unmanageability because we were still operating in this whole idea that somehow we could wrestle satisfaction from life, from our relationships, that we could control everything. And now, as we're moving towards this achievement of emotional sobriety, we're realizing that until we let go of our old ideas, the result is nil. One of the basic ideas I talked about that we need to let go is this idea that somehow things need to go, or that things need to go my way for me to be okay. It's a big lie. They don't need to go my way for me to be okay. I need to learn how to cope with things as they are to be okay. Because if things have to go my way for me to be okay, then what do I have to do? I have to try to control everything. I demand that life conforms to my expectations. Well, good luck with that. When I fight reality, who's going to win? Not me. It's like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. I think he'd kick my butt, even at this age. If I fight reality, reality is going to win. I'm reminded of John Mellencamp's song, I fought the law and the law won. Thom Rutledge is going to sing a few lines of that after I share it today. Tom's laughing about that. Yeah, everybody's clapping. Everybody's waiting for that, Tom, waiting for that. So now we come into this idea, come back to this idea about making available that what was unavailable. When we let go of this idea that I have to be a certain way to be okay, and that the real path to being okay is to accepting myself, all of me, what I thought was the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because now when we look at it from this new point of view, every part of me is just a part of me. It's neither good, bad, or ugly. They're just different parts of me. And how they're coordinated and how they're put together within me is going to determine who I am. And when I achieve emotional sobriety, I attempt to integrate all of these different parts of me into a harmonious whole. WHOLE, instead of operating with HOLESs all over the place. That's the journey we're on, is making available that which was unavailable. So if before I couldn't say to you, no, I don't know how to do this, I need some help, we make available the ability to ask for help. If before I just apologized with everything, I make available the ability to stand for myself and say, I don't like that. No, I don't want to do that, instead of just saying yes to everything. I make available that which was unavailable. If before I lived my life just being only doing things that I felt comfortable with because I didn't want to be uncomfortable, I now take risks and I do things that make me uncomfortable. If there are things I wouldn't dare doing, I try to do those. I dare to take those risks today. I try to own all of who I am and try to let go of any idea whatsoever of who I should be. When we start to achieve that, we know a freedom that may be beyond description tonight. Because we're no longer stuck in this prism of shoulds. We're no longer controlled by the tyranny of supposed tos and ought tos. We are now living our life from a deep, deep center of authenticity and a deep, deep faith and trust in ourselves, which is also something that is now becomes available that we never had before. We couldn't trust ourselves before because of all these games we were playing with ourselves. So it's quite a journey that we're on here. It's an incredible journey. It's a powerful journey. And none of us could have anticipated it. You know, when we walked into these rooms, none of us could understand what was going to be happening for us. None of you would imagine you'd be sitting here thinking about what's unavailable and what do I need? What do I need to make available that's not available within me? And I would urge each and every one of you to do that tonight. After this meeting is over, write down those things that are unavailable for you. That's going to show you where your working points are. That's going to show you, that's going to put a spotlight on what is next in terms of your development. So, I think that's enough said. I think that hopefully that stirs some thought on your part. I just maybe wanted to add one other thing. When I talk about the appeal of love, for that person, they had to erase themselves. They had to say, my job is to meet the needs of someone else so that they would love me. So the holes in their functioning were identifying their own needs and honoring their own needs. That became unavailable. In fact, what happens if a person has taken that path, and listen to this, is if you've taken that path and now you try to assert yourself in a relationship, the first thing you feel is almost a panic attack. Because the anxiety comes up that I'm not going to be loved, I'm not going to be accepted. The same thing that happens with the person with an appeal of mastery. As soon as he shows that he's incompetent, he goes into a panic attack because that whole personality has been built on the edifice of competence. As soon as we venture beyond who we think we should be, we will become anxious, and that doesn't mean something is wrong. It does not mean something is wrong. It means that you are on unfamiliar ground. This is ground you're not familiar. If you're the person who shut off any needs and feelings whatsoever because you didn't want anything and you didn't want anybody to be able to hurt you or be vulnerable, that as soon as you start to feel again, what's going to happen? You're going to get anxious. Oh my God, I'm vulnerable. How am I going to deal with this? And it's when we move in that direction, when we now move towards that willingness to take that risk, we're going to be incredibly uncomfortable. And that is okay. Not only is it okay, it tells you you're heading in the right direction. Remember, letting go of our old ideas means that discomfort was not a good thing. And what we're saying now is discomfort can be a very good thing. It can be part of that process of change. So with that said, I will now turn this over to John Mellencamp, and he will sing I Fought the Law and the Law Won.
No, I need to talk to Mellencamp himself. I need him to sing is what I need him to do. All right, well, tell him I called. All right. Oh, my turn.
He was unavailable. He was unavailable.
He had been arrested. Apparently, apparently it's true. The long one. I'm about to fall out of my chair here. It's anxious. Anxious is good. I love that part. I absolutely love that part. I've got a cat that has waited to this very moment to get on my desk and just start knocking everything off. One thing I teach in my workshop for training other therapists is that the short version is when people start to get better. I remember a couple things. One, I remember a group I was doing, an eating disorder group I was doing many, many years ago. And I asked this young woman at the beginning of the group, "How are you doing?" And she said she responded with a question that changed this forever for me. She said, "Are you asking me how I'm doing or how I'm feeling?" And I, the whole group kind of tuned into that. And she said, "Because I feel like shit, and I'm doing great." And the whole point is, and you alluded to this just a moment ago, that very often, especially, and it's not just early recovery. We go through early recovery at various times. This is the whole thing about going from 6 to 7 to me is about, this is where we enter the daily practice of life, of the pursuit of integrity, the pursuit of being the best version of ourselves. So we go back through this stuff again and again. It's like, just what I always say about that you don't work the steps once. The steps, that's like saying I used a hammer once. I know how to use pliers. It's like, well, yeah, but how much have you practiced doing that? But what this woman was talking about in this group was that she and a lot of the people in that group at the time were at a place where we all have been, whereas is the best way to know, and you actually said this, the best way to know if you're doing good, if you're doing well with what you're supposed to be doing, is if you feel like shit. Because it's uncomfortable as hell. And the one thing I teach other therapists is about people getting better. I say, there's one word that people will repeat over and over and over again when they start to change, when they start to get better. And I'll ask people if they know what that word is. The word is weird. And I mean, literally, if you're therapists or if you're sponsors or whatever, listen to people. When people do not, we think we're going to get to a place where we want to do some kind of end zone dance. I made it. This is a wonderful thing, but it's because of what Alan's saying. No, we're such in unfamiliar territory. And I promise you, this I know. This is what I came away from spending a couple of years working on that fear book of mine. It's like human beings, we fear uncertainty more than we fear anything else in the whole world. So most every defense we can think of that we have is an effort to create the illusion of certainty. That's what, and if you look at religions, if you look at politicians, if you look at all this stuff, this is what everybody's always trying to give you this opportunity to believe in something that is an absolute certainty. It's because we're so scared. But one of the things that happens when we move from 6 to 7, we take that pivot and we go, and we're asking, we're becoming ready, and then we're showing up for the procedure. We're asking these to remove these defects of character. We don't just ask that once. We ask that every single day. Every day, several times a day. It's a daily practice. It's like, and we're asking ourselves the same thing, that when I become aware of the next piece that needs to be removed or moved over or rearranged or whatever it feels like it needs to be done, I'm willing to do it. And so this is where it takes us back to one of the things that the 12 and 12 talk about so much, is that, the word that's repeated through and through 12 and 12 with step 7 is humility. It's everything's humility, and the humility, the freedom that comes with the humility of this is amazing. It's like because it's like, hey, I'm Thom, and I have some mastery over some things, and some things I'm way incompetent about, and it's like I might not even be happy about what I'm incompetent about, but I can admit it, I can acknowledge it, and I actually feel better about myself because if we're that honest with people, and we're able to, and that transparent, we can let people see us, then the freedom is that I don't have to hide. And that's the coolest part about all this stuff. We don't have to hide. We get to be who we really are, and this is the little nutshell I'm working on that I just started a couple of minutes ago. It says, because I think about how I do this time travel thing with myself, and I do this with my clients a lot of times, is let's go back in time, just sometimes it's a couple of months, sometimes it's years, whatever. And let's go tell a younger version of yourself what you just said or what you just did, and tell me how that younger version of yourself is reacting. And of course, we shock ourselves. We shock ourselves because we do things as we move through time that are impossible. I actually have a client, I'll credit my client who came up with this idea, and it's a wonderful idea. I encourage other people to do it. She has a list of what she calls her list of impossibles. And the only things that go on this list are things that she has now accomplished at some point in her life that she would have said at one other time in her life, it is absolutely impossible. That would never happen. Her list, the last time I talked to her about that, her list had 83 items on it, and so one of the things she does with that list is the next impossible thing that she comes up on and says, I'll never see my way through this one. She goes back and reviews the list of impossible things that she's already done. And I love that idea. And so the one I'm working on right now, just so far, just says, I don't know now what I will know later. Because there's so much that and so now I've actually gotten to the place where I don't think I'll ever know it all. It's like never, and that makes me smile. So, sorry I couldn't get Mellencamp.
Well, that he was unavailable. Some things that we can't get now, what we might be able to get later.
That's right. I'll stay on it.
All right, stay on it. All right. So, Roger, are you? I think you made it back. I think I saw that you entered.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Thom. There's so much in, but you and Alan have both shared tonight. I want to follow up with what you said about the freedom of feeling like we don't have to hide anymore. That is just a tremendous feeling. I have it some days much more than others, some moments much more than others, like we all do, I think. But I have noticed over the course of decades that the less idealized I am, the fewer shoulds and ought tos I have, and the more accepting I'm able to be of parts of myself that I formerly judged, the more freedom I have to be me. I've also noticed that the more freedom I have to be me, the more free people around me feel to be themselves. And that's an important thing to me as well. A couple other thoughts. This emotional sobriety, from my perspective, is not at all a one size fits all endeavor, right? And then the examples Alan was giving, it's really important. If my issue is that I'm always putting other people first, or maybe I look at it as I'm always needing to put myself last, then that's what's missing for me, being able to include myself more in my life. Or I might have the opposite issue in terms of trying to find that balance between concern for myself and self-care and concern for others and expressing love and affection for them. Maybe I draw that line in my own favor a lot of the time. And that can be really hard to see if I do that, right? But if I think about it, when I am doing it, other people have tried to point that out to me, but I haven't been listening, right? So who we are and what patterns we formed as kids, what beliefs we formed about ourselves are different to a large extent for each one of us. So the situations we need to try to find the courage to put ourselves into that will evoke not overwhelming anxiety, but a little anxiety. And then we try another situation that evokes a little more. Talking to somebody at a meeting when we find it very hard to talk to them. Being quiet for a while if our tendency is to talk to everybody, right? We just want to give ourselves more choices. Now, how do we do that? And Alan and Thom and I talk about this a lot. We do that by becoming aware of and owning where we are in the present moment, right? What our existing pattern is, what our struggle is, what we're afraid to do. That's how we help ourselves move toward what we hope to become, is by finding the ability to support ourselves enough emotionally where we can get more honest about the things that we used to judge and maybe still judge in ourselves. So the more acceptance I can bring to those parts of myself that I used to judge, the freer I am to own those, the freer I am to name them myself, the freer I am to share them with other people, then that opens roadblocks for me. So it comes back to the honesty that you were talking about, Alan. That'll do it for tonight. Thank you, Thom. Thank you, Alan, very much. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love what you said, Raj, because a great way to think about this is that we are increasing our range of possibilities. So another way of thinking about what I was saying about when I said making available what was unavailable, when we chose a certain path that we thought was the solution, we became fixed and rigid. And things had to be this way. We had to be this way. And now what we're talking about is experiencing in terms of emotional sobriety is we're increasing that range of possibilities so that we're not so fixed. So we have a wide range of possibilities so that we can respond to our needs and to the situation with the best possible response. So see, this ties right back into the best possible attitude. It is only going to happen is if we get rid of that rigidity, if we get rid of that fixedness that we've all developed in our lives, thinking that that's the way that we were going to survive. That's how we were going to ensure our existence. And it worked then, but it's not working now. That's all we got to think. We're not going to fault ourselves for what we did then. We've talked a lot about that. That was the best that was available. It's not something for us to feel bad about or anything. It just needs to be updated. It's like download the current version of the software, right? Let's find where that download is, and let's download that current version. That's what this is about. So thank you so much, Thom, Roger, for sharing this. One of the things that it's important for us to think about in our recovery is our relationship to our emotions. I know that depending on the way we're raised, certain feelings and certain emotions are going to be okay. They're going to be acceptable. And those that aren't are going to be pushed aside and disowned. Well, recovery is about recovering your lost true self. See, it's about achieving wholeness again. Because when I fragment myself and when you fragmented yourself, you can't function well in life. You can't cope effectively with life. We need all of us to show up to be able to deal well with life. Well, emotional sobriety is about discovering new possibilities. Recovery is about recovering our lost true self and discovering new possibilities.